This is a showcase of modern interpretations of the medieval TGIF characters. Despite most of the characters being nobility or royalty, I will not be decking them in usual formal attire. Instead, I will be taking inspiration from a diverse range of internet subcultures and aesthetics. Obviously in formal gatherings, they would be decked in your expected office attire, but in casual, this is how I'd imagine them in the 21st century. Enjoy! First off, I started off with Dawn with an aesthetic of kidcore. Indie and kidcore are very similar, but kidcore has a bigger focus on kids media such as soft plays, kind of like weirdcore but less abstract and intimidating. Both indie and kidcore focus on bright rainbow colours and abstract patterns and sharp/static TV overlays. Indie kid was a subgenre of the indie aesthetic that branched out into kidcore. Indie is short for independent, which I didn't actually know until I looked it up. The bright colours definitely matched Don's personality. He'd obviously love the colours. The fashion is also very artistic, carefree and expressive, which makes it perfect for him as he is very artistic and carefree. Don's personality in TGIF is also very childlike and playful, which perfectly links in with the kidcore imagery of soft plays and childhood nostalgia. My initial idea for Don was oversized multicoloured sweater, cuffed baggy jeans, and white trainers with neon beads. And this is exactly how it turned out. Note for the colours in the sweater, I eyedropped the pride flag colours. Don is technically LGBT as he is Arrow Ace. It's also June, so why not? I may be biased, but Malcolm and Dark Academia. The academia aesthetic is my absolute favourite aesthetic. There are many subgenres of the academia aesthetic, ranging from light academia, dark academia, romantic academia, art academia, which is my aesthetic, classic academia, witch academia, pastel academia, darkest academia, and chaotic academia, and many more. The aesthetic embraces poetry, literature, knowledge, and architecture, particularly inspired by the Gothic and Romantic movements of poetry. The academia aesthetic is similar to royalty core, although royalty core is more focused on royalty and Renaissance/Baroque, which I found out is actually pronounced Baroque, but I'm not going to stop pronouncing it as Baroque, whereas academia is more modern and Victorian in regards to its influence. The thing that separates dark academia from other types of academia is that dark academia tends to use more muted colours and darker colours, and also has more of a semantic field of conflict and negativity. I was torn between dark and light academia for Malcolm, but eventually I went with dark academia because the colours would be comforting to him, as well as the overarching theme of tragedy being more prominent in Malcolm's mindset. Also note the 1976 adaptation of Macbeth being very dark academia in style, and I think it suited Malcolm the best. Modern dark ACAD fashion is typically sweaters and modern British uniform inspired. For a lot of these modern designs I went with winter fashion as opposed to summer fashion, as living in England it is very cold, and I have been to Scotland and it's no different. Keeping the setting in mind, plus I find winter fashion a lot more fun to draw than summer fashion for some reason, so we're sticking with winter fashion. Also note the addition of the Harry Potter scarf. Although I'm not a Harry Potter fan, I do find the overarching theme of knowledge in the academia aesthetic always linking back to Hogwarts for some reason, probably because the implications of Cambridge and Oxford and Harvard University, so I included it. Although the Dark ACAD and Indie Kid duo are absolute foils of each other, they do complement each other so well. And here we have Lady Macbeth, or in actuality, Gruach in Jen, or as I started calling her, Jen. But I recently realised that the closest modern English translation of the name Gruach is most likely Grace or Gracie, so let that sink in. Either way, her aesthetic is dreamcore. Dreamcore is very similar to weirdcore. Weirdcore is imagery of isolated and distorted areas evoking feelings of derealization, discomfort, comfort, nostalgia, and peace. It's very subjective depending on how the viewer interprets it. Weirdcore features illogical or out-of-place imagery similar to surrealism, which was a post-World War I art form exploring the human mind and logic. Dreamcore is essentially weirdcore, but with a bigger focus on imagery you'd see in dreams. Nostalgiacore is also similar, but with a bigger focus on what you'd see in memories. But dreams and memories can definitely overlap, so dreamcore and nostalgiacore can be used interchangeably and can intertwine. Dreamcore and weirdcore are highly associated with liminal spaces such as the back rooms and childhood play areas, paralleling with kidcore. I can honestly smell the chicken nuggets and the slushies from here. Dreamcore in particular is associated with ideas of ascension and angels, particularly biblically accurate angels like seraphim and wheels of Ezekiel, hence the heavy usage of eye imagery. I find that dreamcore also parallels with cloudcore due to the sky imagery. I chose dreamcore for Jen due to her heavy connection with sleep imagery and sleepwalking, so it makes sense. She's also very cunning and aspirational, and aspirations obviously linked to dreams. There is no particular fashion trope with dreamcore as opposed to other aesthetics, as dreamcore and weirdcore are technically more about landscapes. But I did take the blue and the grey and white palette commonly used in the images and expanded upon it. Obviously in Jen's original design you can see grey and blue, which is where I got most of my influence from. So I took this grey and blue palette and mixed it with a slight typical office wear, if you remember that from the start, as I felt like it did fit Jen really well for some reason. But of course I did stylize it a lot. I actually found myself just searching dreamcore on Pinterest and using whatever came up that looked good, even if it didn't necessarily link to the aesthetic. But eventually I came up with this and I really like how it turned out. The eyes in the edit may or may not be mine. Note the quotes from the sleepwalking scene also working really well with the ambiguity of the aesthetic. I was a little stuck on what aesthetic to give Macbeth, and then I thought back to Jen and thought, dreamcore vaporwave duo? Vaporwave is an aesthetic made popular through Macintosh Plus, beginning as a form of electronic music, now featuring neon visuals, Greek statues, and slowed/reverbed sounds. The TV static edits you see of The Simpsons are also highly associated with this aesthetic with the intention of relaxation. The neon colours work really well for Macbeth, although I didn't actually intend for my design for his attire to look that neon. It does end up looking very neon when I switch media for some reason, but I think it still works for him. I went with primarily black with slight hints of neon pink. I feel like the pink works better than the red, and I felt like it worked a lot better than in-your-face holographic vaporwave. I actually have shoes that look exactly like those ones. Bear in mind this is Macbeth pre the events of the play, where he was associated with honour and optimism, hence the chill mood of the aesthetic and the Greek statues, which mainly connote honour and appreciation. Ah yes, the tomorrow, tomorrow and tomorrow quote works perfectly with the ambiguity within the messages seen within this aesthetic. I also found the most perfect font. It's pixelated and it also turns the O's into smiley faces, which is adorable. Camille and cottagecore. There is an ongoing subculture called cottagecore lesbians, with the trope of running away from capitalistic society in order to live in the peaceful woods with your lesbian wife. I didn't choose cottagecore for Camille just because she's lesbian, but because of the high association of nature, peace, positivity, nurturing, and the colour green, which highly parallel with Camille's personality and appearance. Cottagecore is an aesthetic based off the traditional rural English and European lifestyle, highly paralleling the Romantic movement. It is also highly associated with imagery of mushrooms, strawberries, tea, picnics, nature, forests, farms and cottages. Due to the fashion being very 19th and 20th century inspired, I try to keep it very traditional but still modern in a sense. I see a lot of floral print petticoats, which is what inspired this design, as well as hats such as berets, which allowed me to keep Camille's beret. Cottagecore is also highly associated with Jane Austen, who I didn't realise was the author of Pride and Prejudice. I usually get Jane Austen mixed up with Jane Eyre. I know they're two completely different people. Isn't it like the British version of The Great Gatsby? I'm not sure, but Pride and Prejudice is highly associated with cottagecore. Grunge is a genre of alternative rock originating in Seattle in the mid-80s. The music then inspired the aesthetic, consisting of glitch art, vinyl records, cigarettes, and the colour black. It overarches many modern subcultures such as the alt/alternative aesthetic, every type of emo, e-girl, e-boy, cybergoth, punk, all those retro gothic aesthetics. The type of grunge I am using for Ross, however, is the aesthetic you think of when you think of 90s guitarists and the bands Nirvana and Green Day. This is very specific, but Ross I imagine to be a lute player in TGIF, so this led me to make him a 21st century guitar player inspired from late 90s and early 2000s punk and rock culture. The attire is entirely inspired by what I think of when I think of the 90s. 90s attire is still relatively similar to today's attire, despite the fact the 90s was 30 years ago. I know that Nirvana, Skillet and Black Sabbath, as you'll see in a few moments, may not technically be considered grunge, whereas Green Day definitely is. I literally just wanted to use grunge as a starting point and then branch out into other forms of early 2000s and late 90s rock and punk. I knew I wanted Macbeth and Malcolm to have the academia aesthetics due to their more sophisticated personalities, but it was a little bit of a struggle deciding which one for who. I eventually went with dark Acard for Malcolm and light Acard for Macbeth. In TGIF, Macbeth is very optimistic, comforting, nurturing and protective, which alludes to the more positive themes of fulfillment and happy endings presented within light Acard as opposed to the tragedy of dark Acard. Although the fashion of light and dark Acard is very similar, light Acard is primarily whites and creams, whereas dark Acard is blacks and beige, but they do overlap sometimes. Aside from classical piano, academia is also highly associated with Lana Del Rey. Her happier songs such as Video Games and Cinnamon Girl being associated with light Acard. I may or may not have been absolutely swaying to Video Games while drawing this. Great Gatsby vibes. Oh, note the addition of the briefcase was completely last minute. Saw some images of briefcases and I was like, you know what, that's perfect. And here they are all complete. I really feel like some of them complement and parallel each other very well. Obviously this is only like the big 7 characters, since there is a lot of TGIF characters, and way more than I had inspiration for, but if I ever feel inspired, I might add some extras to the line. But this just about covers today's video. Thank you for watching, and if you're watching it in the month of upload, happy Pride Month.